So President Trump has issued another controversial executive action, which on the surface appears to ban refugees from seven Islamic majority countries. Those countries are Somalia, Sudan, Libya, Yemen, Syria, Iraq, and Iran. Um, I'm not sure what the formal name of the executive order is, but there have already been a number of protests in major airports like JFK, International Airport in New York City, and numerous other airports. This is highly controversial. Two things are notable about it. Firstly, it is Trump, whether you like it or not, doing what he said he would do. Now, during the election campaign, he said there would be a temporary ban on Muslims. That's exactly what he's done. Um, the other notable thing is that, well, there's actually a lot of notable things. I was going to say the other notable thing is that this is actually something that I lost my trail of thought. Sorry about that. As I understand it, this extends to refugees from those countries, but anyone with citizenship of those countries is going to have difficulty getting into the United States over the next 90 days. There's been a lot of anger towards this on the grounds that it's seen as discriminatory. Um, a lot of people in the US see this as an attack on American values because America has always been a sort of outward looking country. Of course, things have changed since 9/11. That needs no explanation. In Britain, the athlete Mo Farah, who is of Somali descent, he's a British Muslim, um, tweeted that that this would, stop him from seeing his family, assuming they live in the United States. I've also seen memes, for example, showing Muslim American soldiers who have been killed in action. So it's very, very controversial. As I understand it, these seven countries were actually selected under the Obama administration for some degree of vetting. Um, there's a few things I'm going to take away from this. Firstly, I don't support a blanket ban. I think that is counterproductive in terms of tackling extremism. And this is why some of the worst Islamists are not foreign nationals, but actually converts. I mean, if we look at the Orlando attack, that guy was born in New York City. So some of the worst Islamists are homegrown. The London bombers were all from the Leeds area. They weren't foreign nationals. So it's misguided to think just banning foreigners is going to stop terrorism. There will be lone wolf terrorists, Islamist sympathizers within America, born in America. Um, Also, looking at people's passports is one thing. It is discriminatory by definition. There's no way to get around that. But it is notable that there's other Islamic majority countries that haven't been on this list. Saudi Arabia strikes out. So Trump could be accused of inconsistency in saying that the issue comes from Islamic countries. So why not Saudi Arabia? 19 of the 9/11 hijackers were Saudis. So, it does make one wonder, is Trump thinking of business interests in that area, even though supposedly his business interests are going to his sons? So I think it's very problematic from that point of view. It's inconsistent, and it's not entirely a sure method to weed out terrorists. I do believe that there should be vetting. That goes without saying, and certainly Trump would look at what's happened in Europe recently with large-scale terrorist attacks in Nice, in Paris, in Berlin, in Brussels, and it's entirely legitimate that as President of the United States, his first priority is to protect the borders of the United States. People shouldn't overlook that fact. On the other hand, the idea that this is unique to America, Trump's America, is very naive. There are examples all over the world of state persecution of religious minorities, and Islamic countries are among the very worst offenders. Persecution of Christians in countries like Iraq is absolutely endemic. Pakistan. Not so long ago in Egypt, there was an elderly Christian woman who was stripped naked by a mob on the grounds that she allegedly desecrated the Quran. Actually, it was on that occasion, it was a God, there's so many cases. Um, it's easy to get them mixed up. But basically, on that occasion, it was on the grounds that a relative, Christian relative of hers, had supposedly um, been having a relationship with a Muslim. So the intolerance in Islamic countries is massive. So, I don't want to see any pontificating from leaders in Islamic countries about this until they sort out their own situation. Um, they will say their constitutions prohibit discrimination, but the reality is it is endemic. Pakistan is one of the very worst. The blasphemy laws in there belong in the Stone Age. It really is barbaric. So I can understand why this is controversial, but I don't think it's morally comparable to what is going on in some Islamic countries. I mean, this is discriminatory and it will mean inconvenience for Muslims coming from those countries, but I don't think it is morally worse than what goes on in certain Islamic countries. Let me just put it that way. Justin Trudeau in Canada has responded to this by saying Canada is welcoming refugees with open arms. Well, I have to be honest, I'm quite skeptical about Mr. Trudeau. I think this really reeks of virtue signalling and also incredible naivety. I mean, I don't quite take the Trump approach of just banning refugees. I think there is a moral obligation for powerful countries to help desperate people. I do believe there is a moral obligation for that. But if Canada is going to go down the line of Germany style, just let everyone in, that is astonishingly naive. And even if that isn't quite the case, that there will be immigration checks, and I'm sure there will be, the message that Trudeau is sending out is a very misguided one. To me, that is just as dangerous as Trump's message. I think it's kind of like two extremes. On one hand, Trudeau is saying, oh, anyone can come in because we're a nice, big, friendly Canada. And Trump is basically saying, if you're from one of these countries, you're a terrorist. Now, both cases are, in my view, misguided. There should be a level headed approach, which is somewhere in the middle. The reason I'm skeptical of Trump's approach is because I don't think it is necessarily going to stop terrorism. It will do absolutely nothing to stop homegrown terrorists, like the Orlando attacker. I mean, some of the very most dangerous jihadists are white Western converts, which Majid Nawaz pointed out. He's a well known commentator and he himself is a former Islamist. He has now become one of the most hardline critics of the regressive left's attitude towards Islamist terror. Um, so I think countries and governments need to get this right. I think this is misguided. I don't think it's the right step. Theresa May apparently has already distanced herself from it. She's under domestic pressure to do that. Um, but I would say to those people protesting, I understand the controversy and I don't agree with this decision. But before you sort of vilify President Trump's action, firstly, remember that these countries were selected under the Obama administration. And secondly, just look at other parts of the world. And it isn't even in terms of Islamist persecution of minorities, it's actually state legislation. So I'm not just talking here about Islamist mobs attacking people, which is certainly a problem. There's actually also walls in other parts of the world, but that would be digressing into another area. I'll just say this. I think the most practical approach has to be something in the middle. Um, I think I think there are people on the left who are taking this out of proportion, and they're saying this is Trump banning all Muslims. It isn't that. It's 7 countries and it's temporary. But this isn't just applying to people with criminal backgrounds or on a CIA watch list. This is just a blanket ban, including people who have green cards, including there was one case of an Iraqi interpreter who'd risked his life for Americans. Now he's been detained at JFK Airport for this. That's wrong. That is wrong, and I hope the right can see that. But I hope the left understand that as President of the United States, Trump does need to put national security first. So it's a bit of both. Um, I sort of understand both arguments here. I disagree with a blanket ban, and I think it's counterproductive. But the left, for their part, need to stop being so sort of misty-eyed and utopian thinking. I get it. There's this symbolism of America being the land of the free and welcoming people from persecution, and that is a noble tradition. But at the same time, there is a very real threat from Islamist terror, and they need to acknowledge that. One final point: some people have compared this to Jimmy Carter's ban on Iranians. I think that's somewhat different because that was very specific at a time of a specific situation, geopolitical situation. I'm not sure if it's quite the same situation, so make of that what you will. I'll leave it there. That's my thoughts on Trump's ban on Muslims from these countries.